All right. Hello, buddy. Welcome to our Semantic Kernel community, public community office hours. And as always, this is a public forum, but that doesn't stop you from, participating. Actually, it's one where we actually welcome you all to ask questions, raise your hand, put in the chat anything that you want us to cover. We do have a decently packed agenda today, but again, if you want us to call attention to anything, don't be shy and feel free to jump in. Okay, so first off, in terms of some new blogs, so we'll touch on the OpenAI Assistance in a bit, but actually one to call out is a great community contribution from the MongoDB Atlas Vector Search team. So they have a connector to bring in vector search using the MongoDB platform. And yeah, the blogs shows how to use this with Semantic Kernel to power your AI apps. So if anyone has experience using this already, or just are fans of MongoDB, let us know. I'd be very curious to hear your experience. Again, OpenAI Assistance, it's been the topic certainly after Dev Day. I'll hand it off to Matthew in a bit to give a demo, but we will continue to be informed by what's happening out there in the marketplace, but also, find ways where we can also lead as well. So look forward to that. The other big thing is the latest beta for v1.0 is out. So actually, is Mark Wallace on the call? Maybe you want to chime in a little bit on what I can actually pull it up too, but what's in the v1.0 beta?
Yeah, so we're kind of moving pretty fast, right? So I can't remember the exact details of what's in this beta, right? But I think the key thing is, and Matthew, do we want to just talk about the releases that we're planning before we get to 1.0?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. So
you want me to do that? Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, why don't you take it?
Yeah. Okay. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is we had our beta 6 release, which is probably like the biggest one that actually brings new bells and whistles. You should expect us to be having one more beta release later, I'm hoping today. And that is going to be including some of our planner enhancements. So we're adding a new planner that uses handlebars, which is kind of our replacement of the existing sequential planner, and a stepwise improvement that uses function calling. And if you've been following the blog, you've also noticed that I've been talking about assistance from OpenAI. Chris, who's on the call, is actually working on the initial integration with that, and that'll be part of our beta 7 release. So that's today, latest tomorrow. The next release that we will have is December 4th. Is that right, Mark? That is going to be our release candidates. And this one's going to be pretty intense because it's going to be our last kind of hurrah of all of our major breaking changes, like removing SK context, like introducing iPlugin, a lot of these really large changes that are coming to the kernel. If you look at what's on the screen right now, again, this is our beta 6 release, which came out, I believe, on Friday. Some of the highlights, Alex, if you want to go ahead and scroll back up. It's now easier to add additional templating support. So previously we just had a semantic kernel special flavor of templating. We improved the interfaces so that you can bring in a liquid template engine. You can bring in a Jinja template if you so desire, whatever it might be. We are helping the community out by providing an initial handlebars template engine that's just going to get better over time. You keep scrolling down. If you write semantic functions, previously you couldn't take advantage of the full power of chat completion. You can have different messages with different roles. That is now available to you if you use the syntax that is being shown on the screen right now. And then lastly, Oh, actually, we have two more things. Function calling is much better. So we have an example for that on how you can actually go back and forth. And then lastly, what I think is like super cool, it's kind of unique to Semantic Kernel, is our hooks. So if you're not familiar with our hooks, we have pre-hooks and post-hooks. Basically, you can check what is going to happen before a function is called and what happens after a function is called. In the example that we have here, we're actually showing how you can use this for security purposes. So before sending information to an LLM, maybe you want to check those passwords or PII or confidential information, right? And so you can either change the prompt or cancel the prompt or whatever you're deciding, right? You can obviously use this for telemetry, logging, all these different things. And what I'm personally excited to use this for is providing more feedback to the user. So if you use something like a planner, or we'll talk about assistants in a bit, something like an assistant, you want to know what it's doing. And it's really hard to get that information because it kind of becomes a black box. But with hooks, you'll know every time one of your functions is called. And so you can hook into that and provide feedback to the user that says, oh, I am creating this task. I'm adding this information to it, etc. So that the user knows what's going on every step of the way. Okay. So any questions from folks on our current beta 6 release, the beta 7 release later today, or our release candidate on December 4th?
So we have a question in the chat from John asking any particular reason XML was chosen for the message history. For example, in a world where token count is king, the opening and closing tags start to add up.
So what's interesting, the tags are never actually sent to the LLM, is what I'll first say. This is what we've been internally calling our intermediate template language that allows us to understand, oh, these are different messages. And the connector, let's say the Azure OpenAI connector, it will actually parse this as XML and extract the message and turn it into a chat history object that goes to the API, right? So we're not actually sending any of these message tags to the LLM. So you shouldn't worry too much about wasting tokens with this new syntax. Now, the reason why we chose an XML type of syntax is we found it's very flexible for what we are seeing kind of be created from OpenAI and some other models. So for example, if you've started to play around with the new GPT-4 Vision or Preview or Turbo models, you'll notice that they actually handle content differently. It's not just a string, it's now an array of strings, images, videos, audio, whatever it might be, right? And so with XML, we can actually very easily model, and I think I have an example here with an image. We can have a single message described as an HTML tag, where we can have text and these different modalities all in a single message that we can then parse and then send over to the API through the SDK. So that's why we chose XML. And I guess the last reason, in the future, we kind of imagine that these LLMs can probably write their own prompts, which will be pretty cool. And by using something like XML and reusing media tags like image and audio and video from HTML, we're hoping that these models that have been trained on the corpus of writing HTML will actually have an easier time creating these prompts in the future. Okay. Great question. Great question.
Let's see. Question from Joseph is, what's the planned relation between AutoML and Semantic Kernel down the line? AutoML, I'm not sure if you mean AutoGen or something else, Joseph. You want to clarify? If it's AutoGen, I mean, it's a project that illustrates the use of like multi-agents, right? Multiple conversational agents. And I think last week, actually, if we go back, last week, myself and Devis, we talked about what a possible like integration of those two projects look like. Oh, okay. Joseph's asking about AutoML. I'm not sure which project is AutoML. There's a lot.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, so I was just doing a quick search. So AutoML, from what I can tell, helps you actually build models. That's kind of out the purview of a semantic kernel. With semantic kernel, we assume you have a model or multiple models, and then you're bringing it into semantic kernel so that we can use it to run prompts or to orchestrate functions and plugins.
I see. Yeah, and also Joseph links the Flamel project, which actually, if you follow the AutoGen project, is based off or kind of the extension of Flamel. So yeah, I think it all fits into this type of ecosystem. But good question.
One of the next questions we have is how many release candidates the team is planning. We are on a very tight schedule, and we have heard feedback like, are we rushing these things? Our current plan is we'll have a release candidate on December 4th. They'll give we're hoping the community about a week to kind of take a look at it, play around with it, give us feedback. We'll probably have one more candidate the following week. Let me just do the math. Where are we at with 4th? Yep, on the 11th. And then on the 15th is when we plan on releasing v1.0. What I will tell you as the community to give you reassurances that we aren't like just rushing this out the door. In the last, I'd say month and 2 months, we've actually started leveraging the .NET like extreme experts in Microsoft. And they have, let's say they've whipped us into shape. They are the ones that are actually creating a lot of the PRs that are helping us get to a state where we have V1, where we actually feel good about it. We know it works with dependency injection. We know it won't require breaking changes in the future. And so because we now have these experts providing us very frank feedback that we can improve, that's what gives me assurances and confidence that we can actually land a V1 at the end of the calendar year. Now, unfortunately, what this does mean is there's a very, very tight window for the community to give us feedback on the release candidate. So if you are super passionate about semantic kernel, if you really want to make sure that you can help us land it, I would say schedule in some time, the week of December 4th, so that you can play around with it and give us feedback. It's going to be incredibly important to get any of your comments so that we can get that baked in before we lock things in. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we've gotten like hit over the head from the community is like, your story sucks at dependency injection. Fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it. And I'm sure y'all will be happy to hear our .NET experts in Microsoft. One of the first things they said was, what the hell are y'all doing? Make it easier to do dependency injection. So that's very, very high on our list of things that we absolutely need to get working for v1.0. Otherwise, it's functionally useless inside of the .NET ecosystem.
Cool. So we have a question from Eddie basically asking, are we going to refresh a lot of these samples, especially things like John Maida's Cooking with Semantic Kernel course or all the other ones that are out there?
Great question. So let me tell you what we're prioritizing. So the first things that we'll prioritize are all of the samples inside of the main repo itself. So those are things like the notebook. You might have already seen that we're starting to prune some of the samples in the main repo so that we frankly have a smaller surface area. The next round of things that are a priority are all of our samples on the learn.microsoft.com site. Those will be all updated by myself. Oh, and yeah, Chris is also mentioning the kernel syntax example is like our gold standard within the main repo on how everything works. That leaves everything else. And so what we're doing with a lot of the samples that are individual repos that we might have spun up in the past, we're actually going to be trying to deprecate those so that it becomes clear to the community, hey, this was kind of the old way of doing things. All of the new samples find on our Learn site. And then some of the great content like John created, he's prolific. So the hope is he'll create more content that drowns out the old stuff. so that folks can find the latest and greatest on how to use V1. It will be different. Our goal is to make it simpler to use with the new API changes. And it will be a bit of a fight for the first couple months to make sure that people are using the latest samples that show how to use semantic kernel properly. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, everyone. Great questions. I'll just do a quick call out. If you missed all of these great things from last week, which it doesn't just encompass the US and Europe calls, we actually have APAC as well. And they showed off some cool demos that are out there. So whether, yeah, if you want to catch up, watch some of those, definitely do so. And there's a call out for everyone. If you want to submit any demos, if you want to use this time to show off something that you've built with Semantic Kernel, especially v1.0 Semantic Kernel, yeah, just reach out and we can put you on the agenda. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna also do a quick shout out to, I mean, so many announcements at Ignite. There's more happening literally live right now, but if you guys, one central thing is that Microsoft made it very abundantly clear that it's becoming the Copilot company. So, right, Copilot is, Bing Chat is now just Copilot. So you'll see that everywhere. Some interesting things around Azure Cognitive Search, or now it's Azure AI Search, has come out. So, we're very friendly with that group because that's the first party way to add memory to your applications. Devs is here. Maybe Devs, you want to say a quick couple words on some of this new stuff that was announced recently.
Well, the Azure Cognitive Search is now Azure AI Search. Really nice to see the name shorter. I prefer AI over cognitive. And I think the Azure AI is clearly becoming a platform. As you can see, we have an AI studio and all that. So other announcements, I think you're starting to see the idea of copilots and plugins across the products. Satya talking about the fact that there's going to be one copilot that follows you. I think the work is still in progress to get really there. There are many tools they allow to build your own copilot, customize it, and they will be more accessible over the months. I haven't tried them, to be honest, so there's not much I can say. Regarding vector search, it's nice to see that it's now available also in Cosmos DB. It has been available in Postgres for a while. So all our storages, maybe SQL Server, yeah, not yet, support vector indexes. So you're not forced into a specific solution. You can keep your data where it is. And I guess we will help with our connectors to say, okay, my data is there. Can I use memory on top of that data without having to change it, without having to re-import everything, which I think it will make the memory in that part easier. I don't know if there's something else really to say. I think it was a nice, things are starting to come together. And it's still what I call reactive. Like you talk to a Copilot to achieve some goal. So people will build on that. I'm looking for the proactive part where you give AI a job and it runs in the background. So I believe as a team we will be working, or the community for sure, we'll be looking at that. Like, can I tell AI to keep checking my emails and let me know when something happens, So I'm working on that scenario. For example, in Python, yesterday I wrote a couple of plugins, one for Gmail and one for IMAP. And I'm trying to build an agent that is always watching my inbox with some rules defined in natural language and see how far it can get. I think it's an interesting space to investigate. I think that's all I have to say.
That's good. Yeah, Davis, I mean, I'm sure everyone would love to see that demo when you're ready for it. Okay, very good. So now, as part of our listening session, I want to actually, well, sorry, before the listening session, I'm going to hand it to Matthew to actually give the demo of OpenAI Assistance, because I think it is very hotly requested, and a lot of eyes and attention are on it. So Matthew, can I hand it off to you?
For sure. So I'm going to be pretty quick on this. There's fuller demos in the blog post, and everything that I'm sharing with you is part of our V1 proposals repo. And as I mentioned, Chris is doing the hard work of taking PM code and making it actually enterprise ready so that we can put it inside. Oh, and Gil, yes, and Gil, we have 2 engineers working on actually making this something that we can put in the main repo and share with all of you as a NuGet package. So again, expect that to, at least the MVP of that to land later today. If you've been following along with the blog, last night, the latest thing that we shared is how we imagine semantic kernel templates working with assistance. So for something fairly simple, we have this researcher assistant, and it's just a standard string, right? And that's kind of how OpenAI expects people to use these things, right? You just type in a string, and for every single time the assistant is invoked, every time it is going to respond to a user, it'll use the exact same set of instructions. Right? We, in the semantic kernel team, though, thought, what if we could take this further? And so the API does allow you to change the instructions every single time the LLM is invoked. So we thought this would be a really great opportunity to use something like handlebars or another templating engine within semantic kernel. So what I have on the screen right now is, let me make this a little bit bigger, is our mathematician assistant. And we can see instead of just having a standard string, we're actually using that XML format that we saw earlier. And because we are using handlebars here, we can use handlebars to start injecting information into the instructions, into the system prompt that is used by the assistant. Now, in this particular example, we're using it to pretty much like deterministically tell it the answer to whatever math problem is given to it. So if I run this, we can actually kind of see what's going on. And the reason why we believe this is so valuable, I actually have some pictures in the blog, is if you don't do this, if you just have some static text, what the assistant has to do is it has to be smart enough to use function calling to call, in this case, the perform math function, right? It has to, when it gets a user's request, use function calling, use the retrieval tool, or in my case, solve math problem function before it can finally generate message. And all of this takes time, right? It's an extra LLM call, you're spending tokens, and if you're using something beefy like GPT-4, you're waiting for some time, right? And so with template support, by shoving this into the instructions, you are now giving this information deterministically to the AI assistant every single time, right? And that means it doesn't have to use function calling to pull it up. It already has it inside of its context so that it can immediately start generating messages. It means you're using fewer tokens. It means it's faster. And you can make sure that it behaves the exact same way every single time. So in my demo, let's go ahead and ask it some math question. I think I have one over here that I can copy and paste. This works. What we are having it do is call the perform math function, which if we look inside of our math plugin, what it's doing is it's using the brand new handlebars planner that should be released later today. And we can see the plan that was generated, and it correctly uses all of these different math functions. There's 18, I believe, to actually get an answer. And then it can pass that back to the project manager assistant and then back to the program manager so that it can tell the user you would have this much money after waiting 20 years in the stock market, right? So this is powerful stuff. right? It means you can, again, save time, save tokens, and make things more deterministic. In the blog, I kind of describe another scenario where you might want an assistant that recommends products, right? You know, every single time you ask this assistant, it is recommending something to the user about a particular product. So that would be another really great example to templatize the information that you provide that assistant. Hey, here's all of the reviews about the product. Hey, here's all of the descriptions of the product. Hey, here's all the features of the product. And if you put that all in the system message and the instructions, that's one less thing for your assistant to look for. So it can immediately start providing those answers to the user. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions about kind of our direction of assistance and how we're using semantic kernel templates to really supercharge them.
One question from John is, when are we getting YAML plugins?
Mark is working on that right now. I'm assuming, Mark, it won't make the cut for today. So you should expect it as part of our release candidate on December 4th.
Yeah, that's correct. Like, we wanted to align it with the new API work that we're doing, like, so yeah.
Cool, good question. And actually, Joseph asked to me as an interesting question around a sort of community event. When the release candidate is out, right? If Matthew is saying there's this like a week-long window where you can really like give feedback and try things out. Maybe we can motivate this by actually hosting a hackathon or a virtual one. But we did.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, Alex, I'll coordinate with you. But the week of December 4th, if we can get a hackathon on the books, that'd be a really great way of testing and validating, our release candidate before it goes live.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, Joseph, thank you for the spark of inspiration. All right, so in the next 30 minutes or so, we actually have several questions that have come in from the community, so we can dive into that. And again, anyone, feel free to just chime in, raise your hand if you have things you want to follow up. But we got a really good question from Discord, actually. So Ricochet73. So he asks, hi, we are working on a RAG Copilot that integrates with our static data quadrant, as well as our backend systems via plugins. I'm struggling to get my head around a simple solution to the following problem. We have a set of plugins, they are mathematical in nature and do complex financial calculations based on the parameters. We can use defaults for some of these parameters, but defeats the purpose mostly. Now, when we have a user ask, we can run one of many of these plugins via programmatic orchestration or using one of the planners. Continues. So the issue we have is that not all the variables may be evident from the current chat or chat history. So in creating a plan with one of the planners, we may need some steps to actually divert back to the user to gather more information. The current plans, this is where I'm stuck, do not allow one to iteratively engage with the user to gather more information. What I am thinking to do here is to create SK functions whose task is to request more info from the user and hope the planner would include them in its plan when specific variables need values published from the user. This will entail that we need plans that are only partially executed, their state saved, and upon the next feedback from the user, the plan state would have to be loaded, new variables populated, and a plan evaluated. You could orchestrate this with some effort, but hoping that others who face this solution or problem have a more elegant solution. Okay, a lot there. Go ahead.
A lot there. I'll kind of break this up into a few different pieces. This is really where I think OpenAI function calling really comes in hand. You have a thread, you give it some functions, and then the AI can decide, do I call a function or do I have a message? What's really powerful about that is it knows all the different functions. It knows your fancy mathematical functions and the requirements. And it'll know, oh, I need parameter 3, but I don't have it yet. So instead of calling this function like the user wants me to, I'm going to create a message instead and ask for that information from the user. So you can start creating this like back and forth. Now, the challenge with function calling is it does, you basically have to have an LLM call for every single function, right? Unlike something like sequential planner, or unlike our new handlebars planner that can call multiple functions from a single LLM call. So I do think as we continue to make planner improvements, there's this hybrid world where you can ask something like a handlebars planner to accomplish in number of steps and be smart enough to stop when it needs more information from the user, right? And that's when something like Azure OpenAI functions comes in. So we don't have a concrete solution yet for that problem, but we are aware of it, and we want to make our planners better so that we can support that. So the long way of saying, hey, use function calling today. It won't be as efficient. We're going to work on a more efficient solution. And then the last thing I'll call out is assistance will also likely help you in this space. One of the nice things about assistance is it can do parallel function calling. So that's another way of optimizing things. Instead of just having the LLM call a single function, it can make requests for multiple functions that you can then have done on your local side. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, that's good. Does anyone else want to add any thoughts here? So I'll add that in addition to everything that Matthew said, right? If one very neat thing about the AutoGen project that we talked about earlier is that, yeah, one of the key features of that is this notion of a user proxy, right? Where you can, in addition to multiple agents that you spin up, you can have the user be directly involved and be able to send in input, give that, provide whatever type of feedback, and then have the rest of the agents, use that in their work. So maybe if I have time, I can show off a quick demo. But I think the idea is there. So whether it be one of these different frameworks, Ricochet, this is a really good question, and I think it is going to be an emerging challenge, but one that there will be solutions for coming soon. Looking at the chat. Okay, yeah, John's saying, I'd love to have a stepwise planner that also generates a breadcrumb that can then be fed to a sequential planner in a future. Yeah, it's interesting.
And I just pasted in the chat with our V2 of stepwise that uses function calling. That breadcrumb basically becomes that chat history object that has what the user asked for, what the AI said, oh, this is the function I called, the response from the function, all of that information, what you call the breadcrumb, is there in that chat history. And that's what's so powerful about the Assistance API, is all of that stored in that thread. So that if you do want to do another function call or ask it to create another plan, that information is all there, so that you don't have to constantly reload it into the system. So great. We have trouble accessing the full chat history in AutoGen. Yes, I wouldn't. I know how AutoGen works, but I'm not like the biggest expert. So hopefully that's something that we on the Semantic Kernel side can make more easy for you.
Actually, since we have Devis and even Chris here, I'd be curious to hear their thoughts on how does kernel memory play into this type of like thread history that we're talking about.
I can take that. So what I guess what we've seen, like what we're planning on doing and what we've seen other folks like Llama Index do, that also have like this whole SDK system for doing memory retrieval, is treating everything as a tool, right? And that's kind of what Assistance does today. They have an out-of-the-box retrieval tool that will be used to get memories or information from the files that you upload. But we believe that a lot of folks will want more advanced retrieval mechanisms to do fancier or better RAG. And so to do that, instead of using the out-of-the-box retrieval tool, you'll load in with plugins, with functions into the assistant. Hey, here's my kernel memory retrieval function. And that will be used to use the entire kernel memory system to pull information from Azure AI Service or Search or whatever your service is in the background. So everything comes back to plugins and functions, at least in the semantic kernel world. And it looks like it's increasingly true for OpenAI as well. Everything ultimately becomes a function at the end of the day. Davis, did I capture that well enough?
Yeah, I think I was going to answer from a different perspective. That makes sense. There is a need to have this infinite chat conversation always present in the context. And so if you look at the OpenAI threads, what they do, they truncate the chat automatically for you. So if you're talking with the chat with the GPT for hours, what you said hours before it disappears. So there is a need to have a constant summary of the chat, which isn't more than a summary, but is a collection of facts. And that is what we want to provide in the memory solutions. So when you feed a log of conversations, like what you're talking with a bot, or even if the bots are talking between each other, you don't want to see that. Even those bots, you want to have an agreement of, okay, what are the facts so far? What did we find so far? And that is what I really call context. Currently, we define context as variables, but it could be more loosely typed as a collection of facts that the AI can discover reading through the chat log and keeping that as a hidden variable, always present in the prompt. They can also be fed into the planners. So, like, let's say you're chatting with a bot, there is this context created in the background where you ask GPT to create a plan, you feed in your question, but you also feed in this context, which contains a lot of information. And one of the demos that we did last year was if the planner doesn't have all the information, it will reach out to you. I think we were talking about this and ask like, okay, you're asking me if your boss sent you an email. Who is your boss? How do I know who your boss is? What is his email address? And then the AI would come back to you, ask the information, and store that as a new fact in memory and keep it for the future reference so it doesn't have to ask again. So here's where you can see a little bit of how AutoGen fits in. If you run a few of the AutoGen demos, whenever you ask for something that is ambiguous, AutoGen will reach out to you as a user proxy and asking, okay, what do you mean by these? Can you clarify that information? And then that information ends in the history and is available for the further work, but that history then is lost. So we need that solution to collect all the facts, keep them in memory, and keep them also isolated in the chat, because maybe when you start a new conversation, you might want to say, forget everything that we discussed before, it was a different conversation. Or you want to say, let's keep going with that conversation. Let's import the facts that we have from that conversation. So there is a bit of work to do about, so yes, they're all plugins, but how the right plugin is selected and how these plugins are used. Like there are some patterns where the users say, please save this, please remember this. So we put in memory only when the user asks explicitly to save, but maybe there is a middle ground where AI can decide to save some of the information automatically without any explicit command. I think that can make the conversation easier so that, oh, I forgot to tell the bot to remember that. Now I have to explain it again. So I think there is a bit of work to do in that sense.
Awesome. Great discussion and good comments in the chat. All right, for the sake of time, I'm gonna continue on. So Gaurav asks, please cover the kernel memory NuGet package integration with Azure functions. So there's an issue linked here. I don't know if there's anything more, like, since Devis, I know you've already commented on this, but
Yeah, I didn't have time to look into that yet. So apparently adding the kernel memory NuGet to a solution where you use Azure functions is causing the function to crash or similar. And I was asking Gaurav to provide some code. I see he's updated the trial, but I didn't have time yet to review and try on my machine. Is there something, any error message?
cannot load or load file or
Looks like an
assembly.
incompatibility of the logger. So yeah, I would try to reproduce it. I know there are, depending on which NuGet you're using, there is a client NuGet, which I recommend to use, is .NET Standard 2.0. And that will talk to the memory service that you would deploy separately. If you're trying to use the core lib in your Azure function, you might see, that might be where you see the problem, because that is not really, so the serverless memory is an edge case for C# applications, but is unusable for Python and JavaScript and Java developers. So we typically recommend to use the service. So depending on which one you're using, you might see different problems. I would try to clone your branch, your repo, and give it a run on my machine, see if I can find a solution. But yeah, you might have to override some package version or similar. I don't have anything yet to say.
That's great.
But I won't.
That's good. Yeah, thank you, Gaurav, for the question and filing the issue. Okay, next question from Ajmal. So Ajmal asks, I have a bunch of APIs .NET Core Swagger enabled, which perform different tasks and give results as JSON. I want to create a planner based on a user ask, and the planner should pick the right API and output the JSON result in natural language. Could you please guide me in any demo samples? So I think this is the pretty standard. I don't even think you have to use a new planner. Some of the existing planners can do this. I'll put the result in JSON. Yeah, if the final function or plugin you're using that the planner will invoke has that JSON output using the OpenAI function calling, right? You can yeah, you should be able to do this. So Ajmal, if whatever planner isn't working, or if you have trouble getting it to work, let us know. I'm pretty sure this should work.
One thing I have noticed is I suspect your APIs are very powerful, and you probably have a lot of them. And depending on like which model you're using, that can be overwhelming for some of the LLMs. And so like what we at Microsoft are doing is we're actually, before giving a bunch of functions to our LLMs, we're simplifying them, right? We're saying, hey, instead of this one API that does everything, here's an API that semantically makes more sense, like market task complete, right? You might naturally do that with just a post edit task and changing the status, but by creating a dedicated API called complete task, it's simpler for the API, for the LM to understand, and you'll have fewer parameters that needs to be passed in. So just keep that in the back of your head. Your mileage might vary depending on how complex your API service is, and you may need to simplify it to get really good results from one of our planners, function calling, or any LLM that you use.
Good advice. Okay, Ajmal asks, another question is, what's the state of the NL2SQL plugin? Is this going to be available as a standard plugin, like the time plugin in the future? So I guess first off, maybe Chris, you want to take this?
Well, in terms of the NL2SQL example that's in the semantic memory repo, was originally intended to be just a sandbox for experimenting. So I think that particular project has probably reached end of life in terms of demonstrating. But strategically, I think that type of functionality is on our roadmap to integrate in a kernel memory as part of the larger roadmap. Maybe Devis can provide more details.
Yeah, I don't think there is a timeline. Before integrating that work, I think we need to understand well also how certain Fabric works.
I was just going to say the Fabric stuff that came out today really goes
I'm
to the
pretty
heart
sure
of this.
Fabric will expose some API to do a lot of that and probably more, and we shouldn't reinvent it. So we just have to find the time to look into it, prototype with Fabric, and see how the two things can come together. So I would suggest to look at Fabric if you are in a rush to do something in production, rather than wait for us to do that work in kernel memory. But maybe next year, we will do a blog post about how do you integrate Fabric into your AI apps for RAG and other things. Yeah.
Yeah, the Fabric team is definitely they are going to be the experts from the Microsoft side, at least on everything NL to SQL, or interfacing with data, structured data. So cool. All right, next question from Colin is, I see counts of tokens are being logged when calling semantic functions. Is it possible to get those counts in some structured way so I can add them up and keep track of them in the app? Also, okay, first off that one. I think this question can be basically answered by the hooks, right? The pre-post hooks that you can use. In terms of getting them in a structured way. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I would just say, coincidentally, I think Molly and Mark were just having a conversation about this earlier this week internal to the team. I don't know if Mark's still on the call, but I think if I remember how that conversation ended, Mark had some insight on maybe a future direction in this.
Yeah, we'll take this one as a maybe a possible sample. Matthew, what do you think? I think this would be a nice one to be able to show an example of how to do this. So it's a good example of using the hooks. Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so Colin then asks, in addition to or around logging, I'm developing a semantic function, iterating by changing the template, running the data, starting again. Is there an easy way to log whatever is being sent to the API? So right now I'm using reflection on the semantic function to log the current state of the template, but there must be a better way.
This is, again, I think where pre and post hooks come. I think the biggest thing that was missing with our pre hook was the render template that was actually sent over the wire to the LLM, which is probably why you had to do a bunch of crazy reflection stuff to get that information. That is now in with beta 6. So I would check out the latest blog about beta 6. There's a little line item about that and some of the samples, and you should be able to use that to see what is being sent to the API.
Awesome. Okay, and last from Colin is, any plans for adding retry capabilities to the kernel when calling the model API? Could be for calls that failed because of network issues or because the rate limit is exceeded.
I thought we had retry logic. Mark, do you?
Yes, we do. Like, there's a package, there's two packages, one that uses, there's a basic implementation and one that uses poly. So you just need to depend on those and you be able to add retry logic. We should have an example for that. So let me dig it up and I'll post it into the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, last question is, when can we expect to see more examples ported over to match the changes? So as mentioned earlier in the call, I think notebooks, if I remember, the kernel syntax examples, and then where else? Just like any new other content that
learn.microsoft.com.
Learn.microsoft. That's right.
So realistically, what's probably going to happen is I will be doing some updates to the learn samples while the folks in the States are enjoying turkey. But most of the gigantic changes will be happening as part of that December 4th release candidate. So there will be a period of, might take us a week or two to get all the samples updated. In worst case, maybe up until the end of December. I would expect mid-December is when most of the examples and samples and doc content should be reflecting the latest for SK 1.0. My personal goal is have most things in a good spot so that while people are at home enjoying their Christmas or winter break, they can play around with Semantic Kernel and have enough samples to get dirty. And then when everyone comes back into the office January 2nd, having really, really great documentation, videos, samples, so that as part of everyone's New Year's resolutions to add AI into their applications, you have everything you need to get started.
And yes, Joseph and everyone else in the community, if you'd like to help, right, create some samples or things, we would love to, love to have your help. Okay, we have a couple minutes left. I don't know if anyone has a burning question, feedback, anything that they'd like to share. Again, I'll pull out I'll make a call for demos, right? If you want to show off a demo during this time, just reach out on Discord and we could set something up. And also, if you want to write a blog, right? We've had several guest blogs on the Semantic Kernel site. So if you want to, get your name out there as well, feel free to reach out for that.
Wow, we did it all in an hour. That was impressive.
Yes. I guess one last question I just see from Jeevan is any recommendation on how to recover when the planner chooses the wrong plugin?
I guess to be frank, we don't have like really great retry logic on planners right now. You can just wrap everything in a try catch and send the same request to the planner and say, hey, by the way, you failed last time on this step. Don't include this plugin. That's probably the hacky way today. We do know this is kind of a necessary kind of requirement. So it won't be launched with our first updates to the planners like the handlebar one. But as part of future rev, some of the things that we've explored is you can actually request multiple plans or responses to come back from the LLM. So instead of just asking to create one plan, we will create like 2 or 3 and pick the one that actually works. And what we want to be able to do is add additional retry prompts so that we can tell back to the LLM, hey, this was the user's ask. You created this plan, but it had this problem. Can you now fix it? And just like in ChatGPT, if you say, hey, you did something wrong, it does a pretty good job of self-healing and fixing, we have the hypothesis that will also work for our planners. So expect that to materialize likely in the new year.
Great. All right. Well, we're at time, but thank you everybody for dropping by office hours. And yeah, let's continue the discussion on GitHub, Discord, YouTube, wherever you wanna chat. Okay. Till next time.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.